time for agreeable weather, and to accidentally record multiple videos without your mic being on. Not that I would, do that or, know anyone who would do that. But it's also the time for rookie reviews. Let's start with Paolo Banchero. How good is he? How good was he this past season? And stay all the way to the end before I tell you how good I think he's going to be next season and beyond. Paolo, obviously a high-volume, 20-plus point per game scorer as a 6'11 rookie is, impressive enough. But the way he did it was bullying smaller defenders with his size and his strength. Already a massive free throw rate guy where DeMar DeRozan is not a weak person, but he, is 6'7 inches shorter than Paolo. He's able to drive him back and get all the way to the rim and get easy points. Paolo's mobility and general movement skill as a driver combines so well with his strength and his power, where we see Paolo get himself into an advantageous position here. He's going to slowly size up the defense. Instead of just sprinting at Thomas Bryant, he uses a little hesitation to get to his left foot and use his right shoulder to shield, absorb contact, and finish with the inside hand. It's really impressive stuff, and at what Paolo's able to do at this size and age. Here he's 1v1 versus one of the best defenders in the league, and he makes Bam Adebayo look like a little child. Just bullies him. The strength, the footwork, the speed to power, nothing that Bam can do there. Really just making one of the best defenders in the league look silly. And that's what Paolo did as a rookie. Here's Joel Embiid. This time Paolo walks him right back into the rim, where Joel, had a decent position here. But Paolo's strength is, especially if Joel's not in perfect position to, wall up straight where he's a little turned here, Paolo's going to blow through his shoulder every time, get leverage, and finish that wide open layup impressively. The stuff that he can do, here we see him against new Celtic Porzingis, lowering his shoulder. He doesn't end up making this one, but that's about as close as you can get to the rim without actually scoring there. Paolo is low to the ground. His flexibility at that size is a rare trait where Porzingis cannot get his shoulder this low, and therefore he's backed up, moved off of his spot, and he's maybe impacts a little bit, but Paolo misses a layup that he absolutely should have made. And I think Paolo's finishing issues, which we'll get to, only a 57th percentile finisher, his usage, the difficulty of his shots, all that's going to go down. And just generally as players get older, they get better at finishing. And it's not just the strength either. Paolo's handle is really solid too. He can use a change of direction to get into defenders where he doesn't need a complex handle. His handle's not perfect for sure, as we'll get into, but a simple between the legs to open up his defender, drive his shoulder lower and through Terry Rozier's outside shoulder, and there's absolutely nothing any defender can do there except for foul and give up an and one because of Paolo's strength and dexterity, just the way he's able to maneuver on a drive. And as we talked about before, the pacing is really good too. He's not just barreling at the rim like a lot of young players do. He doesn't sprint forward at Jericho Sims. He knows he has Wendell coming to seal, so he's patient. He has his handle to hold off, Quentin Grimes in jail, waits for Carter to seal, and hop steps into a wide open offhand layup. The flashes are very advanced. Now, as I mentioned, the handling, dynamism, and general change of direction and ability to be deceptive isn't great, where especially when defenders aren't playing him all the way up, because Paolo isn't the most threatening three-point shooter at this point, there can be issues using pure strength to drive through defenders. Almost the exact same situation, but this time Paolo isn't able to use his leverage to get through Porzingis. He holds much better position, and he's able to force Paolo to take a much more difficult shot. And there are some, I think, vertical limitations where the decision-making wasn't always great. Paolo loves these intermediate, tough hop layups, and especially with the double team here, Paolo isn't vertically explosive to generate power to drive through this space, and because of that, when he takes the shot, he's so far from the rim that of course it's going to be difficult. He can make these, and he has made these, as we see and as we'll see, but when you're shooting the ball all the way from outside the restricted area, it's with two defenders smothered all over you, it's not going to be very easy to make these shots. But I think what all this has underscored is that Paolo is a true center in his finishing. The guard stuff and the impressive finishing, contact, balance was always present, but Paolo has really excelled at working against big players, as we've seen here guarded by Randall. He's not able to get anything on the drive, and Paolo uses his footwork to get an N1. While his decision making isn't perfect, I do like, and the fact that I do wish he got all the way to the rim more often. He isn't gonna settle for like horrible shots as often as a lot of young players would. Is he's willing to be patient, step through, and look for a more advantageous window. The process for a guy his age is pretty decent, and he is used as a real big by the Magic, and I'm glad the Magic have realized that Paolo is a big with guard skills, that they'll run him off like cross flex screens like you would any other normal center and get him wide open dunks, which is just something your giant initiator can do, especially when you can couple it with the mid-range scoring potential, where the step back mid-range jumpers look about as good as anyone that age and that size, and his ability to use his pacing and his handle to get to his spots in the mid-range is really impressive, even if they aren't all going in at this point, where again that mid-range efficiency is pretty low. Just his efficiency overall is low, but I do think it's important to consider Paolo's age, his insane usage for that age, and his insane usage for that age as well, and how many good shots at the rim he does tend to create. The shot obviously has a lot of room for growth, I think, as some of the flashes are ridiculous, and when he cuts back on some of the the poor mid-range decisions, hopefully turns them into rim finishes or better passes. The passing is really amazing, and we'll talk about that in a little bit, but you can definitely argue that Paolo should have hit this roller here. He's definitely not perfect in his passing reads off of a live dribble, as basically no rookie young player is. But he's always had this like tough mid-range scoring prowess. I think extending it out to 3 is going to be the next step, as Paolo needs to be able to punish sagging defenses who are afraid of his driving threat, but don't want to play him out. I think this is really going to be a determiner of Paolo's ceiling, is how good can the pull-up 3 get? Because I think the off-ball shooting is going to be fine, as his off-ball game has already translated to the NBA really nicely, as we'll talk about in a second. But Paolo's overall shot-making profile is pretty standard for like rookies. Again, like a good bit below league average for shooting, but the free throw rate obviously just phenomenal and going to be a big driver of efficiency for Paolo as he continues to learn and grow. And just looking at how many of his shots come in this like 3 to 10 foot area, I would love to see him slide a good amount of these shots to the 0 to 3 area to get more shots right at the basket, and I think that will improve his overall efficiency as his process continues to grow and as he continues to just grow as a player in general. And of course, Paolo playing as a real big allows him to be the one back getting rebounds, and Paolo doesn't have to wait for a guard. He can take the ball coast to coast, beat everyone else down the floor, and use his agility and fluid movement to get right to the front of the rim and score. And of course, that opens up his passing game as well, where transition passing is a deadly place for Paolo already. His passing, I think, is well above average for position and just relative to league, where he's really patient serving in transition. As I mentioned, he's not like worried about taking a contested mid-range here or something dumb. He waits for Fultz to slip behind the defense here, no look pass for an easy layup there. The passing stuff is really, really impressive, and I think one of the biggest reasons for optimism for Paolo's game as a legit creator. He's become really great as a pick and roll passer too, where Paolo, as loves these 3-4-5 Spain pick and rolls with Franz Wendell. He's reading a pretty complicated action here, where Paolo gets downhill, he sees the hole opening, and he uses a little live dribble underhand pass to slip it into Wendell Carter for a big dunk. These are the kind of simple but necessary pick and roll reads for high leverage, like high volume ball handlers that Paolo's already making in his rookie season. Again, just patience, extra dribbles. We see so many players pick up their dribble, especially young players, pick up their dribble right here and not take this last dribble to put more pressure on Zach Collins. And this is just a beautiful pass to where only Wendell can get it. This is a quarterback kind of pass, skying over Zach Collins. And it's good KYP, Paolo knowing his personnel, knowing that he has an athletic lob threat, big man rolling with him, so he can make these beautiful little live dribble touch passes and put them in only a place where his big man can go get them, and he doesn't have to worry about contests. And Paolo's off-ball game has grown so much. Check this manipulation on, Paolo is a good enough shooter, and I think is going to be a good enough shooter to draw closeouts. And once he draws a closeout, it's over. As Paolo doesn't have to create his own advantage, he gets into the teeth and look at his eyes. He's staring right at Gary Harris here, but his actual target is sitting in the corner. Eric Gordon is fooled, and it's a wide open pass. This is like really advanced passing manipulation for a teenager, let alone a teenager with some of the best frame measurables of all time. 6'10", young, skilled forwards who can dribble are almost always super skinny. They're never as built as Paolo. And I think the off-ball progression has been something nice. It was a concern that I had at Duke, definitely not a long-term concern, but Paolo loved to catch the ball and jab and wait, and he just wasn't a very decisive attacker, which I thought potentially could limit him early in his career. But it's good to see that he has improved already, working in a great off-ball system with other dynamic scorers. Paolo's no longer, jabbing and waiting for something to open up. He pumps, attacks right away, and makes a great play. This is the kind of stuff that has allowed Paolo to fit into NBA offense so well, especially when he's not working as oopsies. Stop it. Especially when he's not working as a primary scorer. It really is going to be impressive to watch Paolo continue to grow, as he is a real point guard too. He's a center and he's a point guard on offense, where there's simple stuff like this happening all the time, where they entrust Paolo to run a high horns action, handle in traffic, and then use his height and a weird delivery angle to find his shooter open in the corner. This is stuff that point guards do. And I think because of the passing and the obvious pathways to improve scoring efficiency, even if Paolo isn't an elite efficiency scorer, the volume and the multi-positionality and the multi-role use in terms of on-ball player, pick and roll, off-ball, dunker spot, all of it's going to be incredibly useful. Combined it with, I think Paolo is on track to be one of the league's best passers, especially for position, that you have an amazing offensive package there. But defensively is going to be where more questions arise. And more than on offense, he's a big on defense, where Paolo's best trait is his ability to guard these face-up four scorers like Scottie, Giannis types. Not necessarily those players, but those types of players where he can use his pretty good mobility and, like I said, the same ability to get low and slide with these players and not allow them advantages, use his size and strength as a deterrent on these kind of attacks. He's not going to let anyone blow through him. Again, we see him working really well, opening laterally and sliding against John Collins. And a lot of players love to attack from this mid kind of free throw line area where he's just so deadly guarding. When Paolo gets right here, if he's guarding this restricted area position, he's not perfect just because he's not the hugest guy in the world for centers. But it's really difficult to take him off of his spot when he has this cushion to work with, because he can use his advanced mobility relative to his size to impact plays and to force offensive players to have tougher shots. And even guarding as an interior defender, he has some moments where he's effective. Zubac is a real legit large center, and Paolo walls up. He's not fouling. His hands are straight up. He uses his size and his strength and his length to bother a shot there, and eventually turns the ball over. This is the stuff that you want your average defending center to be doing. And there are some rim protection flashes. He's never been a great rim protector, as he's not a great leaper, and the instincts were never perfect. But using his length and some timing improvements, hopefully he can make some plays at the basket and deter shots like that. But I don't think it's ever going to be a huge strength of Paolo's. Oftentimes when he is rim protecting, the impact is negligible, where even Paolo is at the rim, he hops way too far to the left here and is just out of position to guard this Euro, and he offers a super weak contest and ends up fouling there. Somebody fouls. And oftentimes, even when he does make it to the rim, Paolo's lack of great timing and tools make him susceptible to some plays like this, where Paolo doesn't have the vertical explosion to challenge Eubanks at the rim here. And the fact that he's also a little late. If Paolo is right here at this point when the ball is in the air, when Eubanks catches, if Paolo's already at the restricted area, he won't be able to load up and dunk like he just did. But because Paolo is sitting back, he's not proactive about stopping this defender. He's just going to get dunked on like that. And that's going to be a big improvement point, is the physicality at the contest point. There are good moments as a team defender where, again, he can slide with less dynamic wings who aren't the most amazing space creators. Nice slide down, recover, close out, and force a miss there. Simple stuff, but it's important stuff as well. But when you ask Paolo to guard smaller wings who will run around screens, that's when things get really dicey. As most players his size, have no chance guarding screening actions like this, where he just doesn't have the agility or footwork, and his the lack of effort at this point in his career doesn't help either for getting around these screens and actually containing these wings like Jalen or whoever he's going to be guarding, who are really adept at going around screens. There are some interesting defensive flashes as a pick and roll defender, and I think there's some potential future utility in these high drop playing at the level, which is so important in today's pick and roll pull up 3-centric NBA, where he does end up fouling here, which is a nice play by Dame to draw it. But I really appreciate how he's able to use his mobility and his solid hips to open up, slide with Dame, use his lower body to try to get in front and guard with his legs. Of course, he ends up fouling because his hand's in the cookie jar. But I think the movement skill, some of the process, and there really is reason to believe that I think he can be a positive defender in these kind of different pick and roll actions, which would be a huge value add for him, as cover versatility is so important. And there again, flashes of these kind of instincts, but the processing speed, as we kind of noticed, even on offense a little bit, is just pretty slow at this point, where if Paolo is here a step earlier, he can easily get this steal. But the fact that he's late means Duren catches the ball in front of him and he's forced to swipe and ends up fouling. The process, as we've been saying, is okay, but I do think Paolo could use to improve that level of awareness and attentiveness playing off the ball. And some of the higher end hip mobility stuff definitely shows up on ball with smaller players, where Patrick Williams can just blow by Paolo when he isn't able to open his hips, and that's just a wide open dunk in transition. And especially when he doesn't have big space to change directions and to move, he can really struggle to open his hips and to contest drives. As we saw in the Damian Lillard play, Paolo has a ton of space right here to set up, to open his hips, and to track all the way back into this space. But in a play like this, where the defense isn't set up, it's early offense with Giddey attacking, and Paolo's kind of worried about the screening actions as well. He can't open his hips fast enough to contest this downhill drive, and he gives up a layup. Overall, I think the steal, the block numbers are low generally. I think EPM's characterization of Paolo as a slightly below neutral defender is probably correct. I would probably flip these numbers if it was me just basing off my own evaluation. But I think all of this paints Paolo as a player who can be one of the best players in the NBA. I don't think he has potential to be the best player in the NBA, probably because I don't think the two-way impact is ever going to get there. But Paolo's insanely potent scoring and passing game, the creation from a player that size, which potentially allows for you to get smaller non-creators or non-primary guards on the floor, the fact that Paolo can run pick and roll, can bring up the ball, can initiate offense at a primary level, but also play as a center. He can run in the dunker spot. He can flash to the mid-range. There's so many ways Paolo creates good offense, and not only for himself, but for others as well. And as he continues to learn how to get into the paint and to use his strength and his mobility to get higher quality shots for himself and his teammates, I think the sky is the limit for him. And I do really think he can be a top 3 to 5 offensive player in the world. Next season, I think he'll be an all-star for sure. I think he'll be a top 30, 40 level impact player. And I think at his peak, I could see Paolo being a guy who's worthy of a couple high All-NBA selections. Probably not someone who's the best player in the league, but I do think the scoring and the passing and creation potential are there for him to be a top 3 to 5 offensive weapon in the NBA. So let me know what you thought of this, who else you want to see, and what you think of Paolo going forward.